Welcome to the Working Well podcast. I'm Tim Boris, CEO of Fresh Wellness Group. This show explores the diverse aspects of workplace health and personal performance. On the Working Well podcast, we dive into the foundations of what makes wellness work in workplaces around the world. We connect with corporate leaders, executives, and industry experts who are helping make life more awesome at work and home. Join us to learn workplace wellness best practices, personal performance tips, and access resources to jumpstart your personal and corporate programs. Hi, welcome to the Working Well podcast. My guest today is Michael Kerr. And just in case you're wondering, Kerr rhymes with fur. So Michael Kerr is a Hall of Fame speaker who, in ordinary times, travels the world researching, writing, and speaking about inspiring workplaces that rock and businesses that leverage their humor resources to drive outrageous results. Michael's ideas on building and inspiring workplaces have been featured in hundreds of publications worldwide, while his Inspiring Workplaces blog has been listed as one of the top 30 workplace blogs in the world. Michael is also the author of eight books, including The Humour Advantage, Why Some Businesses Are Laughing All the Way to the Bank, and The Jerk-Free Workplace. And by the way, Michael, I love that name. I even actually have a copy of The Humour Advantage right here, but I have yet to get my copy of The Jerk-Free Workplace. So welcome to the Working Well podcast, Michael.
Hey, thank you, Tim. It's awesome to be here. And I loved your little slip there. I thought you were going to say The Humor-Free Workplace, which is...
Well, most workplaces are humor-free.
That's right. I could do another book after The Jerk-Free Workplace. Yes. I could go back and revisit that topic, The Humor-Free Soulless Workplace.
So as a speaker and researcher who's traveling the world, or usually travels the world, obviously this past year has been a bit interesting for you. Tell me a bit about what it's been like not being able to travel as much.
Yeah, it's bizarre. And I just realized I'm coming up to probably my year anniversary of not being on a plane, right? Not going anywhere. Like the kitchen is a far trip for me now. From the bedroom down to my office. This is the extent of my travel. So it's crazy. As a really busy speaker before this, where I was going to the airport sometimes a couple times a week, right? Traveling all over the world sometimes. It was a bit of an adjustment, but I think like so many folks, I've adapted to it. I'm appreciating the small things, which is I think what we have to do, right? It's been a great reminder of the importance of just little things like getting out every day for a walk and how good that is for our health and wellness, and keeping our Netflix account up to date. Appreciating those small things, chocolate, wine, the importance of good relationships, right? And the importance of holding on to our sense of humor, because I think we need it now more than ever.
I agree completely. So what of this last year, what's been the most positive thing that's come out of it?
Boy, the most positive, there's a few things. I mean, again, I would just say on that personal business front, everything's combined, right? Combined. It's been the slowing down. It's been, I have a friend who referred to this early on as kind of a massive extended snow day. And I love looking at it that way. And that's what it's kind of been. And I'm trying to still maintain that mindset. So it's been nice to actually slow down, to again just appreciate a slower pace of life. It's given me an opportunity to actually work in my business, because usually when I'm speaking full on and I'm traveling, it's hard to do a lot of the stuff we sometimes need to do as entrepreneurs working in the business, because we're so busy or working on the business. So that's been great to kind of just take a step back and think about what I want to do now with my business in the coming years, and reimagine it in different ways.
And from a consulting, you still are probably speaking online now, doing this, but you also work with businesses to integrate humor into the workplace. Particularly, I know from my business, wellness is this wide-ranging topic, and humor is a very important aspect of it. What types of things have you worked with companies on this past year? Because there's been some tough times for a lot of companies.
Yeah, for sure, for
How do you
sure.
bring humor
So
to that?
yes, yes, yeah. You do need humor more than ever, and of course, all my presentations now are virtual, like almost everybody's. So, just adapting to that is different, but that too has provided an opportunity for a lot of what I talk about, because I've been talking a lot about how to maintain a lot of humor, how to inspire and motivate and engage employees who are working remotely or working virtually when you don't have that team dynamic anymore, where you're not seeing people face to face. What are some opportunities to add humor when you're connecting in your meetings virtually? So that's been a big part of what I've been talking about. Resiliency, of course, right? With all the stress of the last year, with the uncertainty with the last year, that creates a ton of stress. So talking about using our sense of humor and other mindset things to help people maintain a more resilient attitude, to help build a culture of resiliency as well. So that's obviously been a very hot topic as well. And there's all sorts of issues that come out of this, right? This whole new world we're in, that have come up a lot in presentations and in workshops. Things around trust, for example, too. We've got employees all scattered to the winds working at home for the first time with a lot of companies, and trust becomes an issue, right? We have to learn to trust our employees, trust our colleagues like never before. So communication becomes a huge issue too, right? So all of those topics kind of blend together, and so it's been an interesting year for sure.
I would hope a year into it, we've learned to. Most companies have realized that business can get done and work can get done remotely, and that I know at the first couple months that trust was a big thing. As companies were like, "Well, what if people are slacking?" And I think the stats show that people are working more now than ever.
Oh, exactly. And one of my messages to a lot of senior executives who are worried about that, right? Because I literally was talking to managers sometimes who would suggest that, well, they don't know what their employees are doing every second of the day. And my response to that would be, well, did you know what they were doing every second of the day before? Because I bet you didn't. And if you did, that probably wasn't the healthiest work environment for your poor employees, who probably were suffering from your micromanaging. I didn't put it that bluntly, but we have to be careful we're not micromanaging. And one of the messages I send to all the time is, there's a huge difference between checking in with our employees, which is absolutely critical when we talk about health and wellness and positive workplace cultures, versus checking up on our employees. One of those things builds trust, and one of those things destroys trust. So I would challenge everyone out there to think about that. Are you genuinely checking in with one another on your team, or are you checking up to see if they're at the office at 2 o'clock on a
Yeah.
Tuesday afternoon?
Well, and on the wellness side, we see that all the time in our business. We run corporate fitness centers and workplace wellness programs, and there's still this mindset out there that if someone goes out for a walk in the middle of the day, well, they're not getting work done. I'm like, well, but that's like every stat out there shows that makes them more productive. Yet there's still this mentality of, well, they're not sitting at their desk, so they must not be productive.
Yeah, exactly. And even just taking breaks, right? And as I'm sure you know,
Yeah.
there's so much research that talks about the rejuvenating benefits of breaks, and how we need to take probably more breaks than most of us are taking, because they're good for us, and in the long term we'll be more productive. And we also have to appreciate that with everybody working at home, everyone's in a different situation, right? We don't know what's going on with our employees. Some of them have small kids that they're homeschooling all of a sudden for the first time, or they're taking care of elderly parents, or whatever is going on. And so there are going to be different schedules that are going to work better for different people. And we've got to be more flexible like never before. We've got to appreciate people are in different situations. So let's cut them some slack. Let's trust them. And let's be creative and allow people to create schedules that are going to allow them to be their best, to show up as their best and get more done than maybe they even did before.
Yeah, absolutely. So I asked this question to all our guests, and what is your definition of wellness in the workplace?
Yeah, that's a great question. My there's so much to me that comes wrapped in that wellness term, right? There's so much. I talk a lot about not just the physical benefits of humor, for example, but of course the mental health benefits and the benefits in terms of our just overall happiness and satisfaction and enjoyment in our jobs. And I think all of that ties together. I talk about humor in terms of it being a chicken and egg relationship with wellness and positive workplace cultures. In other words, humor helps drive healthier, more positive, more inspiring workplaces, but it also, and maybe this is even more important, it reflects a healthy, positive workplace where it's easy to maintain a good sense of humor, where it's easy to bring your sense of humor along for the ride and a good attitude because you're working in this environment of trust, of appreciation, of respect, where people get along with one another. And all of that ties together to, I think, to create an overall sense of wellness in our lives. There's so many tentacles to this topic of wellness. I talk even about the idea of just finding purpose in your work, right? And we know how powerful that is in terms of people feeling more engaged in their jobs, but also feeling just happier. And again, tying into a sense of wellness, that it does feed into that overall feeling of wellness.
Yeah, it's so multifaceted, and some companies focus on one aspect more than others, but being able to step back and see it from that bigger picture, and humor is a perfect example of that. Is being in the wellness industry, I understand how humor fits into that and helps people with from a happiness and even hormone profile, like the physiology behind it. There's amazing science to support that. What are some of the biggest barriers you see to integrating humor into the workplace?
I think just a lack of awareness of how to do it, but also fear more than anything. People get scared that if you put the humor welcome mat out, there's going to be total anarchy. I think that there's going to be inappropriate jokes. There's going to be whoopee cushions at every board meeting and people wearing clown noses and skateboarding down the hallways. And it's just going to be anarchy and chaos. And of course, nothing could be further from the truth. As I stress to people, having a sense of humor, creating a culture of humor isn't about being the office clown. It's certainly not about telling jokes, so you don't have to run out and take a stand-up comedian class anytime soon. It's not even about being funny all the time. It's way broader than that, more powerful than that. It's about having a sense of balance, a sense of proportion and perspective about our challenges at work, the issues that can stress us out. So it doesn't make our problems or challenges go away, of course, but it helps us see them in a healthier, more realistic light. It's about laughing at those things that we have no control over, which is quite a bit at work. And it's especially about learning to laugh at ourselves more. As I tell my audiences all the time, is it not a truism that the more seriously a person takes themselves, ironically, the less seriously we tend to take that person? Which is ironic, right? But that's what happens. People take themselves all seriously in the hopes that everyone takes them seriously, when the reality becomes, no, we're not taking you seriously because you're taking yourself so seriously. So it's about laughing at ourselves in order to do our jobs even more professionally. So it's not about taking our customer service or our jobs lightly. It's about taking ourselves and the things we can't control lightly in order to, in fact, be even more professional. So I think it's just back to your question, it's getting over that fear that it's somehow going to be inappropriate or affect productivity or affect behaviors in outlandish ways. And that's just not the case. We know from so much research that workplace cultures that infuse, and for sure, there's different types of humor. So we want to talk about a positive, healthy kind of humor here. Workplaces that infuse their culture with positive, healthy senses of humor tend to have lower absenteeism rates, lower employee turnover rates, higher productivity, not lower productivity. People communicate better with one another. There's more collaboration. There's more trust. There's more creativity and innovation. It can help your customer service stand out. There's all these benefits of injecting your workplace with humor. And again, back to the wellness theme, people are healthier. They're less stressed out. It has a huge impact on people's stress level. So I think it's just a matter, I think, of awareness and education and getting people to understand, no, you don't have to be frightened by this sucker. This can be a huge benefit to you and to your team and to all of your employees.
Well, and you brought up a great point earlier that ties to the humor aspect, is that humor and trust go hand in hand. Studies show that people who are think have a good sense of humor, they trust them more. And one of the videos you had out that was 91% of executives believe that a sense of humor is important for career advancement. 98% of CEOs said they'd prefer to hire someone with a sense of humor rather than someone who's more serious.
Yeah.
Those are overwhelming stats.
Exactly. It's not rocket science, right? People like people who have a good sense of humor. We want to work with people who have a good sense of humor. And yes, there's that great correlation between trust and humor, where it's been shown that when people share a healthy, positive sense of humor, we trust them more. And I think there's a simple explanation for that. We're never more real. We're never more authentic than when we share our sense of humor, especially if it's pointing at ourselves, right? We laugh at ourselves, we become so human, it keeps us humble, and then we trust those people more. And here's a message I think too that's really, really important for folks to hear, because everyone worries about that proverbial humor line. What happens when somebody crosses the line? There's a study in the International Group of Humor Studies, of which I am a member, where they studied the role of the proverbial office joker in these IT companies, right? The proverbial, in this case, the office clown, right? And what they found time and time again were all these incredible benefits of having a person play that role in terms of keeping morale up and keeping people energized during boring times, and reducing stress during stressful times, and retelling company stories over and over. So it kept the history and the traditions alive, the corporate jester did, and speaking uncomfortable truths to the executives. So I use the term corporate jester because that's exactly what they were like, right? Here, what was so interesting to me, though, when we talk about the humor line, here's what was so fascinating was when the heads of those companies were asked about that. Well, does the office joker ever cross that line? And they all said, yeah, of course they do every now and then. But you know what? The benefit that person plays, the benefit of having that role in our team so outweighs the very odd misstep. And when they do a misstep, when they cross that line, they usually know they've crossed the line. And somebody just has a conversation with them and says, you crossed the line, right? And yeah, I'll be a little more careful next time. But the danger is, and this is what I always want to stress, the danger is that we become so focused on that line, that proverbial line, that we don't do anything, right? We don't do anything. So we create this somber work environment. And there's a difference between being serious and being somber, right? So we create this oppressive, depressing, somber work environment that doesn't do anyone any good, because we become so frightened of that occasional misstep. It's crazy.
What's the whole thing about mistakes, right? Yeah, you make a mistake, but how you handle the mistake is more important than what the mistake was.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so, how have companies that you've worked with, how have you seen the cultures transform pre-COVID to post-COVID, dealing in an online world? Have you noticed a shift in, are there more or less of the corporate jesters out there? Are companies dealing with it in a different way?
I think it's interesting. There was a study early on. This was maybe 4 months, 5 months into the pandemic, and I was pleasantly surprised that the stats showed something like 38% of workplace cultures where employees said things actually got better in their workplace culture. Things improved, and I think that's because this whole situation forced a lot of companies to do things that they probably should have been doing all along, right? And it forced them to be extra intentional about trusting their employees, extra intentional about being more open and honest with their communication and investing in more communication. So there were all sorts of positive shifts that happened. So some companies are, and I've experienced this with some of my clients, where they've said, yeah, you know what? In some ways, things have never been stronger in our culture. I think it's taken this situation to help us appreciate things better and to help us just connect with one another better at a fundamentally human level. And so let's hope that that doesn't go away after the pandemic. One of the things I'm telling my clients time and time again is think about the lessons you're learning through all this and what you need to change forevermore. Don't think of some of these changes just in the short term, like, oh, we have to learn this new stuff or do stuff differently for, you know, another 6 months, 9 months, however long it is, and then it's going to all be for naught. Well, no, think about this in terms of the long term. What are some things that you should be doing anyways, regardless of the pandemic? So there has been a lot of positive, good stuff out there, and I think, you know, the office jokers, getting back to them, they're playing just as much, if not even as strong a role as ever in the virtual world. They're just doing it in a different format. They're still bringing the fun, though, bringing that energy to the video meetings. They're doing it in different ways. They're doing it maybe via email. There you go. They're putting on their rabbit ears. They're lawyers pretending to be cats, evidently, yes, based on the story that's.
I haven't seen that video yet. I've heard it's quite good.
It's too funny. I think that now is a legal requirement to start all our video meetings by declaring I am not a cat.
Well, the funny story about that too. My son, he can't do like the video effects on his laptop because it's older. So his friends keep doing it when they're doing their dance and gymnastics Zoom calls.
Right.
So he was like, "Daddy, can I borrow your laptop?" And so I lent him my laptop, and he put like all these blue mustaches and eyebrows things, and it stays on the meeting settings. And so I started up a meeting the other day, and I'm talking away and not looking at my own thing, and people are like, what are you doing? And I look at my screen, and I've got this like blue chevron mustache with like the goatee and big eyebrows, and it was a funny moment, but those are the things that happen now. And
yeah, and it's awesome, right? And I think that humanizes us, right? I mean, we've all talked about those stories where funny things happen in the background. We're in a very serious, and I've been on them really serious meetings, and then somebody's puppy shows up in the background. And of course, what happens? All of a sudden, all these serious faces, all of a sudden, everyone breaks out into a big smile, like, oh, bring the puppy over, what's the puppy's name? And the person goes, guess the puppy, and they take this little puppy break in the middle of a meeting, right? That's awesome. It just helps humanize us again, right? And build those personal connections.
Yeah. And going back again to this past year has taught us a lot of lessons in business, and that will transform work as we know it in the future. And I think there are so many positives that can come out of it. And even when we go back to the office, even if it's part-time, hopefully a lot of these things start to stay in place.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, just starting again, and I touched on it, but just starting again with that whole idea of just taking care of one another and putting people first, creating a more heart-centered, it sounds kind of corny or cliche, but a heart-centered, human-centered organization. Just before the pandemic, Tim, I read this really disturbing book called Dying for a Paycheck. And the punchline is kind of right in the title. It talks about cultures killing people, that there are so many toxic, stressful, dysfunctional workplaces out there. And this book was making the case that is one of the biggest contributors to the pressure on our healthcare system in countries like Canada and the United States that is causing people to have heart attacks and strokes and all these diseases. And there's a direct line, there's a direct correlation from how people are being treated in their jobs, to overwork, to a lack of work-life balance, to toxic workplace cultures, and workplaces just not focusing on health and wellness the way they should be. So let's use this as a wake-up call and emphasize the importance of health and wellness like never before.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. I feel, fight the same battle in my side of the business, as well as having companies realize that adding humor, adding wellness to the workplace is not this cost that needs to be managed. It's an investment. And one of your videos, you made the point is more funny equals more money. And I love it. And it's the same thing. When you bring that culture into the workplace, it benefits everyone.
Yeah.
It benefits health, well-being, happiness,
Yeah.
and productivity, profitability.
Yeah. And there's just people ask me all the, are there any numbers to back this up? Where do you want to begin? There's like about a day's worth of numbers I could talk about, right? There's so much research that shows it. And so many of my clients who have crunched the numbers who show, yeah, this money we're spending, say in health and wellness, or investing in recognizing our employees, or even perks for our employees. Yeah, it's showing up as a lot of costs on our expense side of the equation, but we've crunched the numbers. Here's how much it's saving us in costs, and or here's how much more revenue it is generated for us. So there's so many reasons to do it, but let's again not forget just that fundamental reason to do it. Hopefully, it's the right thing to do. And isn't that nice that those things just happen to fit so nicely together? Yes, it's the nice thing to, or the right thing to do, but it will also make you more money and save you some costs as well in the long run. So to me, it's like a no-brainer decision.
Well, and you know it firsthand too. I've heard you talk about you voted yourself off the island in your, your company, and that's how you started your own business.
That's right.
And yeah, I can't think of how many clients that I've worked with over the years where they're successful, they're climbing the ladder, they're making good money, but they're miserable.
Yeah.
They hate going to work every day, and they go in and they put in their time. And when we look at the stats and ROI, presenteeism is this like the iceberg under the water.
Right.
People are there, they're not sick, they're not on like disability, they're showing up at the office every day, but they're putting out 10% or 20% or 50%. And as a company, that's not good.
No, it's huge. And I'm glad you brought that up. We need to talk about presenteeism way more than we do. I think everybody focuses on absenteeism, but presenteeism is huge. And again, there's research that shows the numbers are enormous. When you have people coming in and they're not engaged in their jobs, their hearts aren't there. I have met people in their 30s, and how sad is this, that are tracking the days almost before they can get their pension, right? The big P, till they retire. And what a way to go through life. It's crazy. And we do have to remember, work has a huge impact on our life. Like you said, we could, is that really it, being successful at work? If you're miserable, you might have climbed up the corporate ladder and you've got this great position in the beautiful office, but if you're miserable, how is that a definition of success? Or how does that tie into your definition of success? Our work affects our mental and physical health, our family lives, our marriages. It affects who we socialize with, our personal development, our personal growth. It's a wee bit of a time sucker. It's the single biggest use of our waking hours in this short journey called life. So I think we owe it to each other. We owe it to our employees. We owe it to our teammates, to our bosses, to our customers, to our families, to create as positive, as healthy a workplace as possible, because this sucker matters.
Yeah. Well, and I grew up in the team sports world, and yeah, if there are people on the team that aren't pulling their weight or underperforming, the team comes together to help that person out. Whereas in a lot of companies, it's just like, oh, that's just Bob. He sits in the cubicle in the corner and does nothing.
Right.
It's like, we'll just pretend he's not there, and
don't make eye contact. He's like a grizzly bear. Just
Yeah. And so there does become some of that, or that person might be miserable, and then they end up getting poor reviews and getting let go, when they might have great things to contribute to the organization, but there were some things that they had to work through, and they needed leadership and they needed help, and they felt they weren't being supported. We see that all the time in companies.
Yeah, absolutely. I just did a video today about creating a culture of support and just making sure that people are comfortable and doing it intentional about checking in with one another. There was a Deloitte study that I reference quite often that showed that the number one way employees gain a sense of belonging on their team, in their company, is just when somebody checks in with them. Again, not checking up on them, but checking in with them in a genuine way that makes them feel appreciated and like they belong to this group of people, right? So it's so important that we do that, and that we intentionally, though, create a culture of support where people can get help, where people can put up their hand when they're having a serious mental health issue. That's so important.
Yeah. And having other people around that start to notice when that might be happening, because I know for a lot of people it is hard to reach out, and they're scared, they don't want to be, there's a stigma around it, and the adding humor and wellness into the workplace raises everyone's boats.
Yeah, yeah, and you bring up an important point there too, right? Because when I talk about the humor stuff, do the fun stuff, one of the things I stress is it is not putting on, a fake smiley face and you turn that frown upside down, Tim. Come on.
Yeah.
It's about using it in a genuine, authentic way to create a psychologically safe environment. And during challenging times like the world is experiencing right now, it's never been more important to create that kind of culture where you speak up when you're not having a good day and recognize it's okay to have bad days. And I have bad days, I have horribly bad days and off weeks. And we need to create that safe space so people can say, you know what, today I'm having a bad day. I'm like a 2.1 out of 10 today. It sucks. And we have to speak up and do that and take a leadership role in doing that so that we don't beat ourselves up, first of all, for having those bad days. Because you know what happens, right? People get stressed out about being stressed out. They get anxious about being anxious. So then your bad hair day piles up on top of your bad hair day, and pretty soon you look like you're from the 1980s, which nobody wants to see. And then you also have to speak up when you're not doing great so that you create that environment for other people to know that it's okay to speak up.
So how can companies start to do that? How can they start to integrate more humor and well-being and support into their office culture?
Well, there's so many ways that they can do it. I think
there's not just one. There's not just one.
Just one? Yes, there's not just one. No, believe it or not, there's not. Wouldn't that be lovely if there was just one? Here's what you have to do, and then you're done. You're done for the rest of your life. Well, it's a big question, right? But it starts by being intentional. That, for me, everything goes back to you've got to be intentional. Great, healthy cultures don't just happen. You can't fake it. You can't go buy your culture at IKEA, because as I always say, nobody will know how to put it together. So you've got to be intentional about doing this stuff and treat it as a priority, which means you've got to model it out loud. You've got to live it. You've got to make sure that what's important for you to see, especially if you're in a senior leadership role, that you're modeling this in an outrageously loud way. But a few things that you can to kind of jumpstart some of this stuff that you can try. One is focus on your meetings. For me, meetings are a critical touch point in companies. And meetings should help you create the kind of culture that you want, but also they should reflect the kind of culture you want. So if you say, hey, we value a fun, humor-filled, creative, innovative, healthy culture, then your meetings better reflect that. If you want a healthy workplace culture, then maybe don't serve junk food as much as we all enjoy it from time to time during your meetings. If you want to have a fun culture, be known as a fun culture, then make sure your meetings are fun and that they aren't sucking the life out of everybody and they aren't these soul-sucking, horrific experiences in the boardroom where everyone's nodding off from boredom. So use your meetings as a touch point to check in with people, to talk about these issues, yes, but also as a microcosm of your culture. So if you want to ramp up the fun in your culture, for example, start with your meetings, because it sends a really powerful message. Open up your meetings with a fun icebreaker. I've got a handout that I'd be happy to share with anyone that has over 60 fun ways of injecting humor into your meeting in just a fun way. So look for those opportunities. Create rituals and traditions around fun, around humor, around health and wellness. I'm a huge fan of rituals and traditions. Every great workplace culture I've interviewed around the world talks about the importance of rituals and traditions in their workplace to help them build their culture, to help them build a strong culture. Rituals and traditions give everybody something to look forward to, something to reminisce about, and they help people create habits in the workplace. So if you want to up your wellness game, your health game, or your humor game at work, create some rituals around it. Maybe it's a Monday morning team hut. I know that's a little more challenging in this day and age with the virtual world, but we'll be back in person one day and you can do some of these things virtually. So maybe it's a Monday morning kickoff ritual. Maybe it's a Friday afternoon team huddle where you just review the top 3 wins of the week. Maybe it's to inject a little bit of fun. It's celebrating the wacky theme days or making up your own goofy theme day. I have a couple clients and I love this because it's so simple. And this is how simple it can be to make to at least start in your culture. This one client of mine, they do third person Thursdays, where everybody refers to themselves, but in the third person, right? It's dirt simple. Doesn't cost you a dime. Even the introverts can get on board for this one. And it's awesome, right? How can you not walk around with a smile on your face all day where, I would be going, hey, yeah, Mike's looking forward to the meeting this afternoon. Oh, Mike has an idea. Right? Like, it's so stupid, but it's so simple to just shift the energy, to change things up and again, send a message about the kind of culture that you want.
That's fantastic. I love that. The third person Thursdays. I might have to try that. uh, One thing I did notice in your book, The Humor Advantage, you talk about a fun squad. Putting
Yes.
together a fun squad. I love that idea. Like, I've always talked about wellness ambassadors and having like the different people that would go around and create that and from a wellness side, but I never thought about the fun squad. So yeah, do you have some examples of how that's worked out in different companies?
Yeah, there's a few clients, and again, it's you have to be careful with this. This is another way that you can quickly ramp up the level of fun in your culture. You just want to be careful that you're not outsourcing it, right? That you're not they don't take on all the responsibility for fun and happiness in your workplace or your culture, because of course we know it doesn't work that way. Everybody's got to get on board with this ideally. Everybody has to
Becomes
think about
the fun police, like
yeah,
the
yeah, exactly. Yes, you get in trouble for not having fun. Everybody has to think about their role in contributing to a positive workplace culture, their role in contributing to a healthier workplace culture. However, it can be a very effective tool, and I've seen it done in a number of different ways. The most effective way I've seen it done is when they take it seriously. So they actually set aside a budget, not necessarily a big budget, but a small budget for a committee or even just an ambassador to lead the charge, so to facilitate it at least, right? To infuse the workplace with more fun, to try some creative things, some innovative things, some new social things. But they take it seriously. So people have to apply for the position. They do it on top of their normal work, but they want people who are really going to be committed, right? So you have to still apply for it, just like you would with any other job. And I think this is one of the keys to success. They do it for a short term. So it gives lots of people a chance to cycle through a sort of fun ambassador, fun committee, fun squad role, whatever you want to call it, and it prevents people from getting burnt out, because we know what happens in a lot of organizations, and I've worked in companies where this has been the case, where it's the same handful of people that do all the fun activities, who take care of anyone's birthday party when it comes up, who organizes every social activity, and they get burnt out. They get tired of doing it because it always falls on the same half a dozen shoulders. So rotating it around, make sure people get a different crack at it, but also that people don't get burned out.
and people. And if it's the same group of people, they probably are the ones that are only participating, and you miss out on people that aren't cycling through that process as well.
Yeah, and it's a really good way to, because also what happens sometimes, one of the things I talk about is making sure you don't create a situation of punishment, which is creating fun events that feel like it's punishment because I'm an introvert and this just, I don't want to do this. I'm an introvert. This isn't fun for me. So involving different people, like your introverts, for example, on squads, on a fun squad like that, you get very different ideas, very different suggestions, very different energy that might appeal to a broader section of people, or at least a different section of people than you have in the past. And it's a way to engage people that normally maybe aren't as engaged in that stuff.
Yeah, that's a great point too. It's the different perspectives.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah.
So I guess my next question would be, where do you see, based on the last year, where do you see things going in the next year or two, as far as workplace culture and policies, procedures, mindset around well-being in the workplace?
I think it's just, if I had my crystal ball out, I think it's just going to get better and better. I think it really has been a wake-up call for a lot of companies. And I think there's going to be just, I think, a big movement to make sure that we don't go back in our workplaces to how things were. We talk about returning to the new normal, but I'm a big advocate of saying, no, let's not go back to the new normal, because the old normal was kind of sucking for a lot of people. So let's aim higher than the previous normal. Let's come out of this, as we touched on earlier, with the lessons that we've learned. Let's come out of this being extra uber intentional about the things we have to do to take care of one another, extra intentional about focusing on our culture. It's been a big lesson for workplaces too. And we know this from previous huge events that have happened in the world, that those workplaces that have stronger, more resilient cultures tend to come through these kind of situations stronger. Of course they do. They come out financially stronger, they come out psychologically stronger, the employees do. And so it's been a reminder too that culture really does matter, and it matters now even more. And I think there's going to be a new generation of employees coming up. There's going to be a new mindset because of all this that isn't going to accept the status quo anymore, that doesn't want to go back to the old normal, and that wants to do things in a different way. And the great opportunity that's come out of this too is just the opportunity to be innovative and try new things and be creative. So I hope that workplace cultures are going to continue with that mindset and continue to challenge themselves to be creative and innovative and try new things that are going to work first and foremost for their employees. If you don't get your culture right, you're not going to succeed, because we know culture is your number one competitive advantage. It drives success. I don't care what business you're in, I don't care what organization you're in, culture is the key driver of success. And so coming out of this in the long term, my hope is that organizations will have learned just how important culture is, and they'll be even more intentional.
And we can almost look at it in the same light as the technology, from basically March 10th to March 25th. The world progressed about a decade in terms of using technology in the workplace. And so hopefully this past year has moved us forward a decade or so in terms of how we view organizational culture, and we don't just go back to sitting in cubicles staring at a wall when we get back into the office.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great analogy. That hopefully it's accelerated our learning curve, right?
Fingers
Yeah, let's hope.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been wonderful. Are there any other things that you like? Oh, I forgot to mention this, or ideas that you have for adding humor in the workplace?
Oh my God, so many ideas. How many hours do we have? Oh, there's so many ideas. It just, again, what I stress to people is just start somewhere, right? Start slowly if you have to, but start, because it really can make a huge difference in your workplace. It can make a
And I guess
phenomenal
they could
difference.
start with your book, right?
They could start with my book, The Humor Advantage: Why Some Businesses Are Laughing All the Way to the Bank. There's dozens, if not hundreds, of ideas in that book on how to inject more humor into the workplace. So, and know this too, that I don't care how serious you think your organization is, every company has opportunities to inject a little bit of humor in them. I mean, I've researched funeral home directors and the most serious organizations you can imagine out there. And I have examples from all over the world of companies that have figured out ways of injecting some fun, safe humor into their workplace. So just start, embrace it, and make it happen. One of the simplest things you can do is start a humor file. Just start a humor file or book amongst your team where you collect the accidentally funny stuff that you see in the world. And specifically the accidentally funny stuff, because there's research that shows that that's the fastest way to actually grow our sense of humor, because it forces us to look at things in a little bit of a different way. It forces us, it trains our brain to look for those things that kind of make us go, oh, that's a little bit weird, right? So collect that stuff, and then your brain will continue to be on the lookout for it. And if you do it at a company-wide level or at least a team level, the other benefit is it sends the message, hey, we want you to have a little bit of fun here. We want you to appreciate your job and find the funny out there in the world. So let's start this. Everybody share and bring the accidentally funny stuff that you see out there in the world.
And I love how you said fun, safe humor, because that's it's not like you have to go hire a dozen Andrew Dice Clays to come into your office.
No, we want to keep the humor positive, constructive, supportive, right? We want to laugh with each other, not at each other. And one of the mindsets too, I think that is helpful is don't necessarily think of it as trying to be funny, but instead think about doing things in a spirit of fun.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important distinction, right? And it's a lot easier, I think, a lot less pressure to do things in a spirit of fun as opposed to trying to be funny, which is stressful for the most brilliant stand-up comedians out there, right? So just have fun. Bring that spirit of fun to everything you do.
Yeah, enjoying the things you're doing on a day-to-day basis, enjoying interacting with people and smiling when it counts, not when you're trying to force it.
Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. And so MikeKerr.com?
That's the that's the website. It's being totally overhauled, so I'm excited. In a few months it's going to be totally different, but do drop by the website. And I'd encourage people, if you want a weekly dose of inspiration and a little bit of fun, sign up for my weekly newsletter, Inspiring Workplaces. And in fact, you'll get a free ebook called 340 Ways to Put Humor to Work. So there's a whack of ideas right there.
All right. What happened to the rest of the 340? What happened to the other? It's not like 365?
I know. Somebody said, why didn't you do 365?
You couldn't come up with those extras.
Because humor today, I have thousands of ideas. So in retrospect, I wrote that book many years ago. I don't know why. So my smart ass answer is because, humor needs a vacation too. They need a few days off. They need their vacation time.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. And you had mentioned, was it 60 ways, a handout for? Yeah. If you want to send me the link, I'll make sure it goes in the link when we post this.
You bet.
And yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks, everyone. Remember to live each and every day as though it were your last, because sooner or later you'll be right.
I love that.
Thank you for listening to the Working Well podcast. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. We love to hear your experiences and how you've applied tips from the show to your daily life, so please keep us posted on your progress. To stay up to date with new episode releases, make sure to subscribe to our mailing list by emailing podcast@freshgroup.ca and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And once again, I'm Tim Boris with Fresh Wellness Group. We'll see you on the next episode.